Hey, it's Carrie.
And Ashley.
We welcome you to the Self Care Cafe. We are both health professionals and moms and nature lovers and food lovers and love helping women get over dieting and just start living. We think that talking about bodies and perfect bodies and dieting is just boring.
Did we put you to sleep there, Carrie?
Yes. So if you are ready to ditch dieting and get to living and talk about more important things, then you are in the right place. We don't put shame and guilt on the menu here. You don't even have to tip us.
Nope.
Come hang with us. The advice is free. We want to have a bunch of girlfriends to just hang out with and get real with, and it's time to start living, ladies.
Hey, Carrie.
Hey, Ashley, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm okay.
Okay.
Well, as you can hear in my voice, getting over a cold.
Yes. It's all right. Well, thank you for recording this with me.
No problem. Here to serve. So what's on the menu for today?
So today we are still in our intuitive eating series, and we are in phase 2, which is getting to know your body. And we're going over principle number 7, I think it is, of intuitive eating, which is cope with your emotions with kindness. So
Good
we're
one.
going to do a lot of talking about emotions and food and how they're related and all that stuff today.
So I know since we're talking about emotions, there's going to be the question of what is the difference between emotional eating and like if you're restricting or under fueling, right? If you're not eating enough, what
Yeah.
is the difference between those two?
Yeah. So I feel like a lot of people that I work with, and I'm sure you do too, I find that people tend to feel like they're struggling with eating at night or in the evening or after a work day.
Mm-hmm.
For people that have a more common work day time, like the 9 to 5 or whatever.
Yep.
Um, and they tend to feel like they can't get enough to eat at night. They can't stop eating. They might feel like they have to start eating as soon as they get home. And they feel like they're overdoing it. They might feel like they're binge eating. Just that general struggle with food after work. And I think that there's a couple different things that can be going on. And one is often people aren't eating enough during the day. So it's triggering that like primal urge, if you will, to eat at the evening time because your body's smart. And we've talked about this in other episodes, but it knows that you didn't get enough to eat. And so now it knows that there's food available at home. So it's telling you you need to eat. And
Right.
after you do this for a little while, it becomes this habit too, or part of your like meal schedule almost, even though it's
Yeah,
not a
like a
pleasant experience,
routine.
probably.
Right.
That part makes sense.
Mhm.
Yeah. And
So
then go ahead.
so basically that people think that maybe they're eating emotionally might actually be because they're not eating enough during the
Yes.
day. So then
Yes.
they get home and have all this food available to them because they either deprived themselves of food during the day or they didn't have time to eat or whatever.
Mhm.
And they're basically their body's making up for the calories that they didn't get during the day. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah. And obviously it can go either way. So maybe it is the emotional eating part, and we're going to talk a lot more about that in detail today on the episode. But if you feel like you're struggling with emotional eating in the evening, I guess my point is check in to see what you're doing food-wise during the day. Are you really eating enough? Because most of us aren't eating enough during the day. And start there because you're probably going to just drive yourself nuts if that's what's really going on, not necessarily, this deeper emotional thing that's happening. So start with that. See if you're really eating enough during the day.
So what is emotional eating?
Yeah, I like to differentiate it a little bit too. So, um, emotional eating tends to have this like negative guilt shame attachment to it. So I like to talk about it in a couple different ways because sometimes we have positive emotions to eating. So if we're going out to eat, eating is tied into lots of social events, emotional connections, like, if you're going on a date and it's romantic, or if you're gathering for a family reunion or anniversaries or anything like that, those are, you know, for the most part, like happy, exciting places and events to be eating at. So when we're having like a positive emotion about eating, I like to call that eating with emotion. So it's not necessarily like the guilt, shame, negative piece. I
Mm,
feel like that's what people talk about with emotional eating, and I
mhm.
prefer to call it like eating in response to emotion when we're eating because we're stressed or we're anxious or frustrated or anything like that on that side of the emotional wheel. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so basically you're saying, so like at a holiday,
Mhm.
but if you've made, if there's certain family dishes, right, that only come out at the holidays,
Yep.
and you maybe eat extra of
Yes.
it, right? So that would be eating with emotion,
Right.
right?
Yep.
And then if you are eating in response to feeling stressed out
Right.
or angry or whatever, then that's more of the emotional eating,
Exactly.
eating in response to those remote
Right.
emotions.
So eating kind of comes after the emotion, and the eating in response to emotion, and the eating with emotion, like you're feeling the emotion as you're eating probably because it's an exciting time, or the nostalgia from your family recipes, or like we talked about the romantic date night, like it's happening as you're eating as
Mhm.
opposed to the
A reaction to the emotion.
exactly, exactly. We talk about that a lot, the reaction piece.
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay. So is there, like, I joke that emotional eaters tend to eat regardless of the emotion.
That can happen because yeah, I feel like it's like that knee-jerk reaction that is just like
Mhm.
a habit now in our brain, right? That
Yep,
pathway has formed, so anytime you're having an emotion, like your go-to is food.
yep.
That's definitely true, and I'm sure some people are resonating with that, like, "Yeah, I do both, but I also eat after I'm happy or whatever," and again, it's just probably that pathway developed because of that emotional habit or the habit of eating because
Mm,
you're feeling something.
right, right. So what is the continuum of emotional eating? What
So,
does that mean?
yeah, this is a great question. So this really gets nailed down into the intuitive eating stuff in the book. And basically we eat emotionally, I guess, for lots of different reasons. So the first one we have to chat about is like sensory gratification. So in this one we're working on pleasing our palate. We're trying to enjoy food, getting some satisfaction from it. So the eating um experience, I guess, is giving us some sort of sensory excitement as we're eating it.
Yeah, and that can even be vision, right? Like we eat with our
Yes.
eyes first.
Yep. And probably smell too, because we could
Yeah.
smell things.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then the next piece is about comfort. And people talk about this all the time, right? Comfort food is not it's not made up. Like that's actually a thing. Like food can make us feel stuff because like we just talked about, oh, my grandmother used to make like mac and cheese this way. And so this is the only way I make it now, for example. Or, um, if you're having a crummy day and you want to have the feeling that you felt when she made that mac and cheese, we tend to repeat that process. So we make the mac and cheese. Um, does that make sense to you?
Yeah,
Am I explaining that
so
well?
certain memories evoke certain feelings.
Exactly.
And so when you're feeling down and you want to feel better, you think of Graham's mac and cheese, and that makes you feel better for a time anyway.
Exactly. Yes, for a time. And that is kind of a key theme that we'll be chatting about during this whole episode is like being mindful of how it makes you feel and whether that feeling is serving you long term, I guess.
Mm. Yeah, and
Um,
when we feel certain emotions, there's also different chemicals going on in our brains and our bodies, right? So,
yes,
evoking that emotion through food or certain foods, certain other things are going on in your body that we're not even aware of, but there are more reasons why you feel like it's that comfort too.
exactly. Exactly. And with comfort too, if we are, eating with emotion, and we're having a positive experience, like, or a negative experience, but trying to be judgment free with that,
Mhm.
because we can eat with emotion or eat in response to emotion, and it can be quote unquote normal, I guess, um, once in a while. And remember, we talk about how things can become patterns.
Mhm.
And
Right.
also, like, so figuring out, is this a pattern for me or is this just a once in a while thing and I feel okay with it? Or do I feel like I need to look into this a little bit more?
Mm. Yeah, like every now and then, I just want ice cream for dinner.
Right,
And
right.
it's not necessarily based on any emotion or not. And so it's like, I don't know, like it's been several months and I just feel like having ice
Yeah.
cream tonight for dinner.
Maybe we don't feel like cooking. Maybe
Yeah.
it's really hot out. Maybe
Mhm.
we're not even that hungry. Right.
Well, you
And
just want
so,
to sit down with a bowl of ice cream and a good movie
yeah, exactly.
and a
And
salty snack with it.
and then it sounds like you're not having judgment about having ice cream for dinner either. We just are doing it and then moving on. And so
Right.
if that's how you're experiencing it, that is, I guess, like part of quote unquote, again, normal eating. Whereas if we're having the judgment afterwards on a regular basis,
Mm.
well, if we're feeling bad about this, like what is happening? Is it our belief system or is this happening a lot? And so we need to kind of get to the root of those feelings. Um, that part's tricky.
Yeah, and the root of why are you choosing ice cream
Mhm.
so often for, right?
Right.
So a lot of it's the intention behind it.
Exactly. It's how we're using it, like we talk about a lot.
Right.
And like Carrie mentioned, a lot of things are happening with our body when we're feeling emotions, and food can also, release feel good hormones too. So, if we're having that emotion that we don't like and we eat food and it gives us that burst of happy hormones or whatever, um we probably will continue to keep doing that because it does feel good. And like Carrie said, usually it's for a short amount of time though. And again, if we're doing this as a pattern, we tend to maybe feel some guilt or shame around how we're using food. Um, so, looking into the root of it, like we just said.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
What about eating to distract?
Yes. I feel like a lot of us do this, and sometimes it might be intentional and sometimes it might not be. Um, because if we're doing it to distract, that's one aspect of it, but if we're eating and it's distracted eating, that's a little bit different too, so,
Right.
like, we're talking about it today as in we're eating so that we can avoid our feelings or making decisions or dealing with life in general, um, so an example might be, like, coming home from work or whatever you were doing that day, and we just kinda sit in front of the TV and start eating,
Right.
kind of as an escape.
Yeah. Which is different from watching TV while you're eating and not paying attention to what you're eating.
Right, exactly.
It's almost like it's just the other side of the coin
Right,
as far as
exactly.
distraction goes. So, yeah, a lot of times, like, maybe you're watching TV or your video games or whatever, and you just pile up the food around you and you're just eating and escaping from your life
Right,
for whatever reason, right?
yes, yep, and again, if that's once in a while, that is again maybe part of quote unquote normal eating. But again, if it's that pattern or it's happening often, then we really want to look at why we're choosing this.
Mm. And then
Um,
besides distracting yourself, you can also numb yourself with food,
right,
right?
right. So a little bit of a more intense intention or behavior is like using food to numb yourself from your feelings. Um, a lot of times I hear people talk about like, oh, I have a food coma. Um, and I feel like it's used very casually in the
Mm.
fact that, oh, I just ate too much, so now I'm just very tired, lethargic right now.
Yeah.
But some people are using this regularly. Um, because it kind of keeps you focused on those feelings instead of whatever else might be going on, or it's just hard to focus on anything because your body's not feeling physically very great. Um, and continuing to do this over time can also um, keep us out of touch with our hunger and fullness cues, kind of erodes them away.
Mm. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. And sometimes we're feeling like out of control, or out of touch maybe when we're eating in this way.
Mm. Yeah, I kind of picture it as like, say, like you think of your body and you've got your emotions and they're starting to surface and you're
Hmm.
shoving them back down with the food,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yep. Definitely.
yeah.
Um, and then another piece of the continuum is like punishment eating, I guess. Um, so we have some self-blame going on, so we engage in some punishing behaviors. So maybe we're eating like aggressively or forcefully. We're not taking any pleasure in it. We're just kind of like punishing ourselves with the eating.
Hmm. So would that be include like restricting?
I guess I would probably say yes, but I feel like it's more of a I'm going to eat so much I make myself sick
Oh,
sometimes too behavior.
okay.
Like I guess it could go either way.
Yeah.
Um, but that's sort of what I was picturing was
Okay.
I felt like I did something wrong and maybe it was my food for the day, right? Like I picked the wrong food today. Maybe
Mm.
this is more of like the um I blew it, so I'm just gonna
Go
keep
for it.
eating, but with a really angry tone
Mm.
to that
Yeah.
emotion, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So if I keep eating after I'm clearly full, then what other need am I trying to fill with food?
Yeah. Something. There's probably something there. Um, and I'm giggling. I'm trying to make light of this because this is a super serious topic, but um, I feel like this is such a common question.
Mm.
People tend to have such a hard time stopping when they're
Mm.
eating, and they know they're full. I've heard them tell me this lots of times. I feel full and I cannot stop. And so something is probably happening on the emotional side.
Mm.
And so there are a bunch of different triggers that we can touch on quickly. Um, Boredom is a huge one. Um, so many people eat because we're bored. We use it as a way to fill time.
Mhm.
We use it as a way to make something more tolerable. We put off work while we're eating. Oh, I don't really feel like doing that, so let me go have a snack first. um, this one's really interesting. Sometimes people that are overworked, they feel like they always have to be doing something or being productive, so then they fill their time with eating when they have a gap in their schedule or something, which is really interesting point of view, I think. I hadn't really thought about that one before.
Yeah, I would say, well, a couple things. If you find that you're bored that often, I would recommend getting some hobbies.
Yes.
Right? I mean, like we said, we are giggling, but there are solutions to these too. Like
Yes.
if you are that bored in your life, then maybe it's time to do something different.
Right.
Um,
And also, are you actually bored or is it a different
mm,
emotion too? Like really focus in on what am I actually feeling? And a great way to do that is you can Google this. Um there are things called emotion wheels and they have so many types of emotions on them that I think we all sort of not necessarily forget about, but we have trouble naming. We're all really used to talking about like happy, sad, mad, angry, those types of emotions, but there's so many more. Um, and it's easier to find a solution or move through an emotion when we know what it is.
Yeah, if you can really, really name it, beyond just happy, sad, bored, whatever. Yeah, that definitely. And also I think that if you're one of those type A personalities who always has to be doing something, then
Mhm.
you also need to learn the skill of slowing down
Yes.
and the benefit of resting and
Yes.
knowing that it's okay. You do not have to always be doing something.
Mm,
I do tend to be like that sometimes. I almost feel
same.
guilty for sitting down and, you know, just watching a program or whatever.
Mhm.
So knowing that like your body needs rest also.
Right,
There's got to be some balance there.
for sure. And with the boredom piece, they actually did a study
Mm.
and they used crackers as the food in this study. And they took two groups of people, and one group was given a really boring task like rewriting lines or something like that, um, like high school detention or
Like
something.
I will not eat the crackers. I will not eat crack-
Right, something like that. And then there was another group that was given a much more engaging activity, like, they had to use their imagination and creativity, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was way more exciting than writing lines. And they gave each group, or each person in the group or whatever, um, like a little snack bowl of crackers or something during their work time, and the people that had the really boring job, the writing lines, group, ate a lot more crackers than the people with the more engaging task. So
Yeah,
it's
that's really
interesting.
interesting. Yeah. So to show that correlation
Yeah.
between eating and boredom.
Mhm. Yeah, because if you're bored and the task is kind of boring, like, let's find something to be a little exciting right now, and, eating does release those feel-good hormones, so it's a little, you know, happy hormone happening while you're doing something that you don't really want to be doing.
Right. So it gives you a little lift while you're
Yeah.
bored.
Another type of trigger for emotional eating is, or eating in response to emotion, is like a bribery or reward kind of thing. So, um, a lot of people might reward themselves with food for working hard or completing a task. Like, oh, when I finish this, I'm going to go get a coffee or an ice cream or whatever. Um, and that can be okay. But again, if it's a pattern, because there's always tasks that need to be done. So if we're rewarding ourselves with whatever every time, that can get kind of sticky, especially if it's ice cream.
Right. Right. Like sometimes you gotta finish a task and then just pat yourself on the back and move on to the next
Right,
one.
exactly, right?
You know,
Like, the self-talk affirmations can also be a great reward. Um,
or the feeling of accomplishment or
yeah,
right. Do
yeah.
write a to-do list. Like I feel like when I get to check something off my to-do list, and I think we differ on this though, don't you? You decided you don't like the to-do list, right?
I go back and forth.
For me, I like it because it feels like I've accomplished stuff. I can look and see, oh yeah, I accomplished this and that today.
Mhm,
So I personally like that. And so instead of reaching for food, I can check it off the list
mhm.
and it's that
And ha
feeling of accomplishment.
Yeah, exactly.
So different learning to reward yourself in different ways.
Yes, find out what works for you, for sure.
Yeah.
Um, and then another piece of it is sometimes, like, I feel like this is maybe more of a parent-child relationship part, but sometimes we only get like a fun food or a treat with good behavior. And so then we start, um, what's the word I want, Carrie? Correlating is close, but I'm not sure if it's the right one. Um,
Associating.
maybe, I don't know. We start sort of like, yes, associating, thank you. We start associating those behaviors with this type of food.
Mhm.
Um, or if we have quote unquote like bad behavior, then it's even you might have a stronger emotional response because you don't get that treat, right? Like,
Right.
really?
Or as you when you get older and you can get the treat yourself,
Mm,
is sort of that rebellion, right, comes
yes,
out. It's like I'm gonna
yes.
eat this even though because I deserve it and blah blah.
Right. That whole like I deserve it piece, or I only deserve it if I'm good, when everyone deserves it because food is food. It's not part of our morality, but it definitely um gets intertwined with it a lot.
Yeah, for sure. So
Uh,
another emotional trigger would be excitement, right? Like
yeah.
it can be food can be exciting and sexy.
Yeah. It can add excitement to your day.
Mhm.
And like we were just talking about, like, what are you using this for? Like, oh, let's go. I think we talk about this example later on as well, but it works here also. Like, let's go for a coffee or an ice cream after work or whatever because I want to hang out with my friends and it's exciting. Or if you're doing it alone, it's still exciting. There's just not that other piece, the social connection piece.
Mhm.
And then if we're doing it every day after work, well, what is missing, I guess, maybe, that doesn't give you that excitement, and you have to find it through food almost, I suppose. So, like, again, how are you using it? What's the intention behind it?
And what's the pattern with it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Dieting is another interesting
Mhm.
piece to this excitement that we're talking about, because when you start dieting, usually there's some sort of hope or excitement about that. Like, oh, I'm excited because I'm going to lose weight, or I'm excited because of whatever the result I'm looking for is. Um, but because diets really don't work and they tend to make us feel the opposite of how we want to be feeling, we end up with like this feeling of despair.
Mhm.
Like this didn't work for me, or it
Not
didn't
to
work.
crash down.
Yeah, exactly. And
Mhm.
so then we end up eating like the forbidden foods that were on the diet plan, whatever.
We're not allowed on the
Not
diet.
allowed on the diet. Thank you. And it kind of like recreates that feeling of excitement that you were feeling at the beginning. And then it starts this big cycle, right? So when
Mm.
we're on the diet, we are feeling excited until we're not anymore. And then to feel the excitement again, we eat those forbidden foods and then we do it over again, because
Mhm.
then we probably felt guilty about eating the forbidden foods, and it goes on and on.
Right. And so the cycle continues.
Exactly. Another piece is like soothing, because again, we can find comfort in food,
Mhm.
and it's easier to eat than sit with your emotions,
Yes.
for sure.
Sure.
Short term at least, for sure.
Short term.
Yeah.
Yes.
Another um piece of the excitement topic that we're talking about is love, and Carrie has some great examples of this one.
Yeah. So, like, do you, with a client I'd worked with in the past, couple things that she realized was that she had a very critical mother who was very critical of her, including her of her body and her food choices. And then, but she had this one grandmother who was about unconditional love, and she felt comfortable and safe there, and she could eat whatever she wanted there. So she equated that love and safety piece with that grandmother, but also included the food in it.
Mm.
Those whatever, those foods kind of became like she equated like love, um, right?
Like,
Because
when I eat this, I feel loved.
yes,
Mm,
yes,
okay.
exactly.
Yeah.
Um, and I can't remember. Yes.
I was gonna
And
say, I
the
don't
other
remember what it was either.
and then the other one was actually like, and my own grandmother, she was an excellent cook and baker and stuff. And but it was always kind of like, and how many of you have and maybe we do it ourselves to other people. Like, if you love me, you'll eat my food.
Mm,
I made this for you to show
right,
you that I love you. Therefore, in order to show me you love me, you must eat it.
right.
Right. Or, I
Yes,
mean, it's not said in those terms, but that's the feeling, right, that you
for
get.
sure. Yeah.
So yeah, so that love piece can really be kind of that love belonging,
Mm-hmm.
um, can really be associated with food too in different ways.
Yeah. And then we add into like making romantic meals for people. Um, it's similar. And again, it's the intention to like, I want to create this exciting atmosphere for us. So I made this meal. There's so many pieces to it.
Yes.
Yeah. And another emotional trigger might be like anger or frustration or maybe even rage.
Mhm.
Um, and this one was really interesting. I hadn't really thought about it too much before, but eating crunchy food can really be a release for some of these feelings because it's like kind of an aggressive
Mm.
action. Like, it's funny. We tend to have baby carrots a lot as our vegetable for dinner because my daughter likes them. And sometimes I don't feel like cooking vegetables because who has time for that? And I don't like the extra dishes. But we get the really, like, thick ones, and sometimes we have, like, competitions on who could crunch it the loudest, like, make the loudest crunch sound.
Yeah.
So we use it in a more fun way, but I can definitely see how eating crunchy food can, like, help you feel through some of those
Mm.
angry feelings.
Yeah, it requires more, so you got more muscles going,
Right.
and the sound of it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
For
and
sure.
chewing also releases, like, feel-good hormones.
Yes, there's
There's,
some
like, the movement yeah, the movement of your jaw, so
Mhm.
that helps to kind of calm you down a little bit.
Yeah. So, and this is why a lot of people with anxiety sometimes have that habit of chewing on things.
Mhm.
I've seen people, whether it's pens or pencils,
Yeah.
whether it's the rings on water bottles
Oh,
that come
yeah.
off the cap, or
Mhm.
the cap themselves, or whatever. Like, if you've got someone that's always, or their nails, their fingers,
Yep.
there's a reason, because it actually is calming. That's why, if
Mhm.
you think of like babies who suck their thumbs or the fingers or pacifiers, it's because it's calming to
Exactly.
them, and that doesn't necessarily go away as you get older. So it could be another reason too why people eat, because it's that chewing action
Right.
also, right?
Yeah.
And there's a calming, that certain chemicals are released in our body just by the act of
Mhm.
chewing.
Right, and so finding something that's safe to chew on
Yes.
or a non-food item, but that's sort of like food, like gum, for example, instead of pencils, um, or food if you're trying to work on not using food as the tool, but you still want that chewing sensation.
And
Um
also, yes, and also to learn other coping methods that don't
Mhm,
have, that kind of offer the same benefits without the chewing.
exactly. Some other emotional triggers are similar to the one we just talked about, but like stress, anxiety, or like mild depression. Um, chronic stress is it delved into that mix. And so we tend to eat in response to these emotions because we want that like urgent relief. They're
Right,
really not a good, fun emotion. And we tend to eat to avoid them
right.
or like distract ourselves from them, procrastinate feeling them.
Yeah, is anyone, like, as you listen to this, hopefully are you seeing yourself in any of this? Are you connecting with any of this?
Mhm.
So just some food for thought.
Oh!
But
I don't know if we've even used that one yet in all of our episodes. I'm so happy we found a place for it. Yeah, another emotional trigger that might happen for people is like being connected in a
Mhm.
group. So having a group and feeling like um or being in a group can affect how you're eating,
Right,
basically.
right.
Because
Eating
sometimes in
or
order
not.
to be yeah, exactly. Sometimes in order to be included in a group, you go along with what the group is doing. So, like, "Oh, let's go out for pizza," or "Let's go for ice cream." Um, or maybe it's a group that only orders salad when they go out to eat.
Mhm.
And sometimes we feel pressure to do the same thing.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So order what you want. Um, but again, like if you're feeling pressured to order salad because everyone else is, you're changing what you wanted, and
Mhm.
then it might come out and you're eating later. Like, oh,
Right.
I really wanted that pizza that was on the menu or whatever. So then I'm gonna go and eat a pizza later.
Right. Yeah, and I'd say you're probably not the only one. If you're with a group, you're probably not the only one feeling like that.
Mhm.
Usually like when you have a group of friends, there's often a leader, right? A leader or two.
Yep.
Um, so everyone, maybe other people may be feeling the same as you. So if you take the lead and order what you want, you never know. You may be releasing the pressure off other people, like, oh, I don't have to eat salad. I can have I can have that burger or whatever.
Mhm.
So just know that you're not the only one feeling that, especially
Right.
when you're in a group. Um, and to maybe choose to be the leader, um, and help everyone else out in your
Yeah.
group.
Listen to your body.
Mhm.
And the last one that we have to chat about for emotional triggers are like feeling in control.
Mm.
If your life is sort of out of control, or you feel like it's out of control, or you feel like you don't have much input, or, anything along those lines, eating can be an outlet to, um, oh, my vocabulary today, my goodness. Enforce is not the word I want, but it's the only one I can think of. Or like gain that control, I guess.
Mhm.
So whether it be through restricting, which I see a lot,
Mhm.
um, or, eating certain ways or using certain food rules,
Mhm.
those can all be part of this. And also, if you are restricting or you are following food rules, we tend to then flip to the I can't stop eating because I was restricting.
Right. Right. And you may not know that that's why
Right.
you feel out of control,
Right.
right? But
Yeah,
that's often behind it.
for sure.
All right. So now that we know the triggers, how do we cope with emotional eating?
How do we deal with this? Yeah, I think first we have to notice it. And that's what we were just giving you some tools
Mhm.
for. Like, there's lots of different triggers, there's so many different emotions. And again, food is really wrapped up in a lot of those things, anyways. So it's about those patterns, like we kept talking about. So, first, notice it or start exploring it if you feel like you're struggling with something. Um, and then once you're like, oh, I feel like maybe I'm doing this, we kind of have to start at the beginning. And so
Mhm.
when you start to feel like I want to eat something, you have to ask yourself,
Am I
what's on our
hungry?
hunger blueprint?
We happen to have a blueprint for all of this.
Yes. So we'll walk through it, but you can download it. Having the visual is so much more helpful. And the
For sure.
download link is in the show notes. And basically it kind of goes through all these questions. So when I feel like I want to eat something, ask yourself, am I hungry? Like really think about it. If yes, then eat something.
Mhm.
And there's more information on the hunger blueprint too. If you're not hungry, well, then what are you feeling? And again, those emotion wheels that are online can be really helpful to help you figure that out.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, journal it, think about it, talk it out with a friend. Maybe even start therapy if you feel like that's something that needs to happen.
Mhm.
Um, and then if it is a feeling that you're noticing, um, what's the best way to deal with this feeling or move through it or um, whatever? I don't know.
What do you need? What does your body need?
Yes. Yes. What do you need? So, what is a coping tool I can use that isn't food if that's what I've been doing?
Right.
Another piece is what are my unmet needs? Because we do tend to fill those up with food.
Right.
Maybe we need rest. Maybe we do need nourishment, but maybe we need it in a different way than what we've been doing.
Mhm.
Maybe we need to move our body. Um, and trying to meet your needs with a more positive outlook, like using some self compassion and kindness to allow yourself to meet your needs. Um, because a lot of us tend to just avoid them. We don't need that. We don't deserve that. I can't take the time for that. Um,
Yeah, and if you're a people pleaser,
mhm.
you tend to push your own needs aside
Yes.
to meet everyone else's, for reasons that are not very necessarily healthy either.
Right.
So how would you treat a friend who's, who's feeling the way that you're feeling? What would you say to that friend?
Mhm.
What would you advice or help would you offer them?
And take
You're
that.
and take it. Do it.
Just do that. Ugh, yeah. And then, like, dealing with your feelings. Obviously, Carrie and I are not therapists, but these are general
Mhm.
helpful tools. And again, if you need to seek out therapy, please do.
Yep. So
Um,
you could use this with your ABCs.
mhm. Remind
So
us what those are, Carrie.
so A, acknowledge and accept how you're feeling. It's okay. The feelings aren't right or wrong. Okay. And then B is breathe.
Yes.
And that's
Like
a couple
like
things.
breathing.
Deep breaths. It
Yeah.
brings oxygen to your brain and it also gets things calmed down. Um, and then C, commit to using your tools. And and that means your tools can be there's a number of them, whether you need to do some grounding, whether you just, and as she's already named some of them, do you need to go out for a walk, do you need to call a friend, do you need to just sit and meditate for a few minutes, like whatever it is, use your tools, all the tools. And if you don't have any tools, you feel like you don't have any tools, then you need to get some just, ways to deal with your stress.
Yeah, and writing them
What we
down, I
talked
find can be really helpful for people because when this is new to you and the habit isn't quite formed yet, it's
about.
easy to end up back in the same pattern, and that's what we're trying to break, right? And so having a visual of that list of tools that you're trying to use can be really helpful, whether it's on your phone or in your planner or somewhere that you only see or whatever. Just as a reminder, when I'm feeling like this, I'd like to try this tool and see how that goes.
Yeah, just, and label it your toolbox.
Mhm.
And then you've got, because when you do kind of get into that headspace, it's like, I don't know what to do. Like you kind of blank, right? So if you've got that toolbox to go back to and look at, and then oh, right, right. And even make note, this tool worked in this situation, right?
Mhm. And maybe
Um,
it didn't in this other one.
right, right.
And also like getting curious about how your emotions feel in your body can be really helpful because sometimes we feel them in our body before we realize we're feeling them. And
Right.
so, um, like stress in your shoulders or like your neck area, that's a huge one for a lot of people, and that's a more common one. But, or anxiety, if you're feeling like your belly's kind of feeling weird, that's another kind of more common one. But
Mhm.
finding what it feels like in your body, um, kind of bringing it back into your body and paying attention can be
Mhm.
really helpful to maybe notice it sooner.
Mhm. Yeah, when you start to feel, you kind of feel your shoulders go up, right? Because
Mhm.
you're tense, those muscles tense up. Maybe
Yep, or your jaw
maybe you're
clenching.
clenching your jaw. Some people it's their lower back
Mhm.
when they're going through, when they're stressed out, maybe their back starts hurting, headaches. There's all kinds of them, but yes, start noticing
Yep.
when you're feeling those emotions and where in your body you're holding them.
Yeah. And also ask like, how does coping with food serve or disserve you? Um, because like we said, it's often more of a short term
Mhm.
solution, if that's the right word. Because it's not really a solution, it's more of a band-aid.
Yeah, it's a coping mechanism that you've been using.
Right.
And coping mechanisms can be healthy or unhealthy.
Right.
They can be helpful or not helpful.
Yes. And it's gotten you here like it's gotten you this far.
Yeah, you've survived.
And yeah, and how is it making you feel?
Right. Is it still working for you?
Right. I like that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, because for example, like the food we're choosing to cope with our emotions might taste good, they might soothe us, but it also disconnects us from our bodies and maybe even relationships.
Mhm,
Maybe I feel too full and uncomfortable and like physically ill afterwards.
mhm,
Um, I'm not enjoying anything from life because I'm feeling like this.
mhm.
And maybe even I'm feeling guilt and shame because I'm doing these things.
Yeah, and if you think about it, those of you who feel like you don't have a voice, like whether that is a habit that you have picked up in a belief, like you shouldn't speak up, right?
Mhm.
Or maybe you have someone in your life that has told you, shut up, right?
Right.
And don't talk, you don't have sometimes that food, because it shoves that voice down, right? Like if
Right.
your mouth is full of food, then you can't talk.
Right.
So there can be some of that also.
Yeah. Another thing I've heard people say too is like people use food as like a social connection almost because if you're feeling like empty and isolated,
Mm,
if we're eating, we can feel filled up
mm. Yeah, and especially if the food is connected to like family
or
or
other people.
a certain memory or something.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And so I guess our other how to is thinking about how food can nurture you in a constructive way. Um, so using food for fuel, but also like being satisfied with your food choices, feeling like you're in control of your food choices, but not being rigid about your food, um, making sure you're eating enough to support your body, that
Mhm,
eating is like a pleasurable experience because all of those things create a positive experience or relationship with food and yourself.
mhm,
And once you find the tools to use for coping with your emotions that aren't food most of the time, I feel like all of those things go together and they're just gonna really help with your overall mood and, people that are using coping strategies, that are serving them the way they want to have them work for you. I don't know. Um, they I know that was like the worst sentence ever, but Carrie, paraphrase it for me.
I don't even know what you said.
Okay. So people that are using their tools and they're finding them to be helpful for them,
Mhm,
right?
yes,
Are much happier people,
yes,
right?
yes.
And when we're using these tools regularly,
Mhm.
we can um like combat acute stress and things like that a lot better.
Yeah, so
Does that make sense now?
when
Okay.
you get into the habit of what do we always say? Consistent practice.
Right. I'm like, I don't know, we say a lot of things. Which one?
Consistent practice. It takes consistently practicing your tools so that they do become, because you have consistently been practicing turning to food for comfort,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
That's become your pattern. That's your habit. So in order to break that habit or that pattern, you have to consistently practice something else.
Yes. And
Um,
go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
Okay. And this
No, no, no,
isn't
no.
going
You.
no. This probably won't happen overnight either because we've been doing it for so long,
Right.
probably, right? And so being patient with
Mhm,
yourself, giving yourself that kindness like you would a friend, like
mhm,
takes time. Remind yourself of that. Um, and that doesn't mean that we'll never eat in response to emotion again.
mhm,
And I think that sometimes people might be doing quote unquote well with trying to cope with their emotions with different tools. And then we have a day where we do have an emotional eating experience with food. And then we sort of go back to the start line, I guess,
Mhm.
and feel like we messed up.
Yeah,
So,
and that it's the habit changes. There's no perfect way to do it. Then
yes.
there's no one perfect habit or anything. It's you're going to have days where I don't know what you want to call it, relapse, I guess maybe.
Yeah.
Flip up, whatever you want to call it, where you go back to old habits because it's not like so we've talked before in the brain as you're forming new habits, you're forming new pathways in the brain, new nerve pathways. It's not like those old pathways just go away
Right.
automatically. I mean, it takes a long time. Like your brain will prune them eventually. Um, but there's still the habits that you've done, and if you think about like how long you've been doing a habit,
Hmm.
it's never going to change overnight.
Yes.
So it takes a while. You got to consistently practice it, and some people can do it faster than other people. Doesn't make them better or anything like that. And I think the other thing with this too is if you've been using food to comfort yourself, be careful about making food the enemy.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that food is bad.
Right. It's
Uh,
just how you've been using it, right? Like the intention, like we keep saying, like the intention behind it was to do this, even if you might not have realized it at the time. So
mhm.
it doesn't mean the food is bad. It was just the intention wasn't helping us in the long term. So now we're adjusting that intention.
Right. Your intention at the time was to survive whatever
Right.
you're feeling, right?
Yes.
Is survival all you want out of your life? If so, then carry on.
Right.
But if you don't, if you really want more and you want to thrive in your life and you want to be happier and healthier, then you need to change something.
Yes. Wise words to end with, Carrie.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. And I do want to let our listeners know about a really exciting feature that's out there for our podcast now. Um, there's a cool new thing, and you can see it in our show notes, description, whatever. And it will say something about texting us, and it's really cool. So um, the wording might change because we're able to adjust it, but it will say something like, to answer this question or ask us a question or whatever, text us. And so if you click on the link, it will open your texting app if you're on a mobile device, and there will be some coding in the beginning of your message. And please don't delete that because that is the way it's going to get to us specifically. If you delete it, it will just go out into the internet somewhere. That code is our show code, so it knows to come to us. But you can text us a message. You can let us know your name and where you are, and you can answer the question that we ask on the show, or ask us a question, or give us feedback, or whatever you like. It's just a fun way to
Give us
engage with
some
us.
love.
Yeah. We aren't able to reply to it, just so everyone is aware, but I think it's really exciting. It's just a really easy, quick way to ask us a question or give us feedback or whatever.
Yeah, because well, if they ask us a question, we can't respond.
We can't respond to it, but we can respond to it on the show.
Oh,
So
gotcha.
if you leave your name, we could even shout it out. So
Ooh,
that's exciting.
that is-
So yeah, so you can get a hold of us that way now, or our social pages are linked down below. And remember, we mentioned our hunger blueprint earlier. The
yeah,
link to
make sure you
download,
grab that
yeah, the link to download that is there. And we always love hearing from you, whether you want to ask us a question or give us feedback, like we said. We love it.
for sure. This was awesome.
Awesome.
I made it through without a coughing fit. Woo-hoo.
Yay! Well, I hope you feel better, Carrie.
Thank you. Have a
Welcome.
wonderful day.
You too. Love you, latte.
Love you, latte.